Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge, where we love to talk everything about the Toronto Maple Leafs, the team that we love and hate simultaneously. I hope I covered that perfectly, as Kevin Armstrong does at the top of the show. He's still away on vacation, soaking up the sun. I'm filling in for him again this week. And as usual, I'm joined by my colleague and fellow Maple Leafs writer at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. And last week, we had a lot to talk about, but considering when we recorded, it was a Sunday. The Maple Leafs played the Winnipeg Jets, and it was something, to say the least. Austin Matthews post-game called that game, quote unquote, a gong show, and it was completely out of control. To keep it brief, here's a Cole Notes version of it. Rasmus Sandin gets kneed by Neil Pionk, no penalty on the play. Jason Spezza is furious that there was no call. He takes matters into his own hands, nails Neil Pionk. Once again, no penalty. He resulted in a suspension. Neil Pionk eventually got a 2-game suspension for his knee on Rasmus Sandin. Fights ensued afterwards. Wayne Simmons was going after Logan Stanley, got a few punches in, and Logan Stanley walks off as if he won the WWE Championship belt. Alex, I'm pretty sure you were on there. I was on there. We saw everything unfold. That game was ridiculous, and I can't believe it got out of hand that quick. And again, Jason Spezza ultimately handed a 6-game suspension. We're not saying that Spezza didn't deserve a suspension, because it was a late hit, kind of dirty at the same time. He deserved a suspension, but was the length warranted enough for 6 games, given his career, how he hasn't had any prior history? Everyone was maybe hoping 4 or 5, but the fact that he had an in-person hearing, it was going to be 6. Was that the right call?
No, it wasn't the right call. And you know what? No one ever wants to be this guy and blame the refs after every loss, because, the Leafs, for the record, did not play a great game on Sunday, and they probably deserve the loss one way or another. But, it's just so frustrating to know that had the refs just done their job and called the blatant knee on knee by Pionk on Sandin, none of that would have happened. Spezza wouldn't have gone out of his way to try and hurt Pionk, and none of the gong show, as Austin Matthews described it, would have ensued after that. And we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. We would have been talking about how the Leafs didn't put up a good effort against the Jets, and that was it. But it was just such an obvious missed call. There was a ref watching it happen. And it's just, I said last night, it just gets so exhausting watching games at this point, when you know that, especially after Tim Peel got fired last year for being the guy that had a hot mic and happened to have a hot mic and kind of got screwed over by that. But at that point, everybody kind of discovered that the NHL officials were managing games. And at this point, you see them call some of the absolute softest plays in the world. You can't tap a guy with your stick sometimes, you'll get called for slashing. Yet there's blatant knee on knee calls like that just go completely uncalled. And I think we were all a little upset about it on Sunday. I know I probably said some things I probably shouldn't have, but it all goes back to the fact that had the refs just done their job, we would not be sitting here talking about it. And again, you were right, Peter. Spezza did deserve to get suspended after that. I know that if somebody on the Jets had come and run Spezza the way that he did to Pionk, I think we would have been calling for whoever did that's head as well. And we would have wanted a suspension, but it's the fact that Sandin's out a couple weeks because of that knee on knee hit. And Neil Pionk has a cheap shot history. He tried going after Mitch Marner last year for scoring an empty net goal. He's one of the least talked about dirty players in the league. You don't often think of a guy like him when you think of dirty players, but he's got a bit of a track record for things like this. And Yeah, so I do think in that sense, and especially because the Spezza didn't injure him on the play, like he got up and he finished the game. Oh, and then coincidentally went into concussion protocol on the same day that Spezza's hearing was going on. And it, I think in that sense, Spezza definitely shouldn't have gotten 6 games. I agree that he should have gotten suspended. He probably should have gotten 4 or 5, like you said, but 6 games for a guy that's never had a track record of doing things like this, who obviously did it because of what Pionk did no more than a minute before that. And the fact that Pionk wasn't injured after Spezza hit him, I think the suspension should have been a little more tame, but we've moved past it now. Here we are talking about it a week later, and it's just, yeah. I don't know. It's tiring. It's tiring, man. That's all I'm going to say.
Since then, the Maple Leafs and Spezza have appealed the suspension. Who knows how long that is going to take, because we saw what happened with Tom Wilson previously before and how he appealed the suspension. It got called back, and he had already served about 16 games of the suspension, and they brought it down to 14. So Spezza's already served 3 games. We'll see what happens there. I also believe during the broadcast with the Maple Leafs and Blackhawks that they talked about this game and how the management and how everything needs to be called to avoid scenarios like this, especially from the officiating side, because it was disappointing. I mean, it really is. And they're supposed to be there to do their job, call the game and see fit. And they didn't. They let it get out of hand. And it started with the whole Pierre-Luc Dubois ragdolling Austin Matthews. Then you had Pierre-Luc Dubois once again running into Joseph Woll, clear knee to the head, no goaltender interference call on that. And yeah, it's gotten to a point now where the fans have been saying that the officiating needs to be better. NHL has decided to continue to coddle and protect the officiating at this point, even with Gary Bettman sending out a memo saying that if you talk anything bad about the officiating, you're going to get fined $25,000. At this point, forget the fine. They deserve to be called out because it is disappointing. And as you mentioned, Alex, Rasmus Sandin out 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to talk about that hit, or not necessarily the hit, but the severity of the injury, because it looked more like it was going to be a 2, 3, 4 month kind of thing. That looked like a really bad injury. Maybe he tore his ACL, MCL, any sort of ligament damage, because that looked pretty bad. I mentioned that best case scenario, it would have been a 2 to 4 week thing. And it is best case scenario, 2 to 3 weeks right now. Obviously really great news for the Maple Leafs and Rasmus Sandin, but really could have been a lot worse for Sandin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what really fueled my anger on Sunday night. And I think fueled everybody else's anger too, is Rasmus Sandin's been such a key part of the Leafs defensive core this year. And, we're looking at a play that at the time we all thought would keep him out for the rest of the season. And, we're lucky that he's only out for 2 to 3 weeks, but I think at the time, the fact that it looked like it was going to keep him out for a good chunk of the season, I think that's why everybody was so upset that the Pionk call went unnoticed. Because think of it, if the refs call, and Brad Meyer was standing right in front of it. And yes, I am going to mention him by name because he refed game 2 against Boston in 2019. And I know that's been brought up a couple times, the whole Jake DeBrusk, Nazem Kadri stuff. Yeah. So Brad Meyer has a track record of doing this, and he stood in and watched this knee on knee hit happen, and he didn't say a word about it. And you have to wonder, had he called the knee on knee hit there, the Leafs probably get a power play. I don't see any reason why Spezza would have gone after Pionk had they gotten a power play there. They get a chance to start fresh, potentially score a goal, and get the game closer to even. But instead, the refs don't call anything, so Spezza feels the need to go out there and take matters into his own hands, and it's just a trickle down effect in that sense. And I'm just, we are very lucky that Sandin's only out a couple of weeks, but it's just annoying to know that all of it could have been avoided if the refs just did their jobs.
Yeah, Rasmus Sandin really has been one of the key players for the Maple Leafs. Granted, he's playing third line minutes, but still an integral part. And I've written quite a bit about him this season and the pairing and chemistry that he has with Timothy Liljegren, how the pair is like tops in terms of possession numbers, Corsi 4, expected goals 4, scoring chances, you name it. This has been a dynamic pairing. And even with Travis Dermott, whoever's paired with Rasmus Sandin, you're going to have success. Granted, again, make some mistakes here and there. It was a rough game for him against the Winnipeg Jets until the injury. It was a rough game for everybody. But Rasmus Sandin has held his own. He's been more confident, and I think he's running away with the spot right now. And obviously, he's integral. Like, there's no other way around it. And the fact that he could have been out longer months, 2, 3, 4 months, maybe. Had that been the worst case scenario, I think Kyle Dubas may have just said, okay, you know what? We need to fill a hole on defense right now, because granted, as good as Travis Dermott has been, he probably could have inserted on the left-hand side, but you still have the lingering holes about Timothy Liljegren and Justin Holl coming in and out of the lineup. So you have to worry about that. You needed to find some stability. But thank heavens that it's only that, and we should see him in the new year or after the Christmas break or the roster freeze when everything is all said and done. Make sure that you are following everything Hockey Writers related, as everyone is constantly putting out articles out there for you to enjoy. Subscribe, like, comment, and follow on YouTube, and also subscribe to our Morning Skate newsletter at morningskate.io, where the content never stops daily with articles from everyone. You don't want to miss out on that. So as we move away from the debacle that was the Winnipeg Jets, the Maple Leafs had 3 straight games against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Well, not 3 straight games, not back to back, but 3 games this past week against the Blue Jackets, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, the Maple Leafs seemed to have turned the page each game with a really great start, but it seemed like their old defensive bad habits have started to creep back in. And we saw that it was a massive lead for the Maple Leafs heading into third period, lose 5-4 to the Columbus Blue Jackets, especially a goal in the dying seconds of the third period. Great start, 1 turnover and multiple turnovers costed the Maple Leafs against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and same scenario against the Chicago Blackhawks. Alex, is this a cause for concern, or is it just maybe something that the Maple Leafs are dealing with, considering the fact that they are without Mitch Marner, they are without Jason Spezza, and they are without Rasmus Sandin, 3 key players for this team, where just weeks ago, all 3 were in the lineup and they're finding success. All 3 of them are out and they're not. Is this just a coincidence, or is it actually something that's Keith kind of alluded to back to last season, where he knew things was going to go wrong south if they don't change it?
I don't know. I think it could be considered a little bit of a short-term concern, because the Leafs are they just played the best month of hockey that we've ever seen. Having said that, I don't know if it's enough of a cause for concern that the Leafs have to do something about it, because they won 2 out of those 3 games, like you mentioned this just there. And I'm not going to pretend like they don't have anything to improve on from those games, but at the same time, like I said, the Leafs just came off their best month of hockey I think I've ever seen them play, like regular season wise. And so they were due for a little bit of a slump. And I think some of it also is Jack Campbell starting to show just a little bit of wear and tear, because, you know, he's taken on a Freddie Anderson like workload so far this year, and he's never had that kind of workload before. And he's been great, just starting to seem like maybe he's been overused a little bit, which is good, because Peter, well, not it, the fact that he's been overused isn't good, but it's good that it's happening now when Peter Mrazek's returned, because now hopefully if Mrazek can stay healthy, then at least we'll be able to run their tandem like a 1A, 1B kind of thing, which I think was originally the plan. But what makes me feel a little more confident about the fact that about their the games that they've played this week and these old habits kind of creeping in is that we know that Sheldon Keefe is not going to stand for these habits. And the Leafs came out, and I believe it was against Columbus and against Chicago on Saturday. Keefe didn't come out talking about how great the guys played and how, we scored goals, we found a way to win. Like he came out and he said there was a lot about tonight's effort I didn't like. And obviously you saw the gif of Kyle Dubas after the Leafs made it 5-4, just walking away, shaking his head, which is so funny because that's what all of us were doing, I think, when David Kampf scored that final goal. But yeah, you look back to the 2020-2021 season, and when the Leafs had their winning habits questioned, and Joe Thornton piped up and said, hey man, it's all right. We're top of the league. I don't think that mindset is happening this year. I mean, you heard about how the Leafs, when they were in California, they didn't have any days off out there. They didn't go party or anything like that. They strictly stuck to their schedule and focused on getting the wins. And I think that's the mindset around the team this year. I don't think there are too many times when the Leafs are going to say they're satisfied with the way they played. I think they're looking at it objectively and saying that there is always room to improve. And I think for that reason alone, I'm probably okay with these recent games, because that, like you mentioned, the Leafs are missing Marner, Sandin, Spezza, and Dermott. So obviously getting all four of those guys back will be a massive boost. And I don't think that they're going to settle for barely scraping out wins despite these bad habits coming into fruition. So I do think there is improvements to be made, and I think there's work to be done. But at the same time, I don't think that it's a reason to be worried.
Yeah, one big note, Peter Mrazek did make his return back. Aside from the first goal, which maybe he probably should have had, I guess maybe just shaking off the cobwebs, but he was stellar for the Maple Leafs in that game against the Chicago Blackhawks. So glad to have him back. The numbers may not show that, he played well, but he was lights out of his mind in his return, making some key saves when the Chicago Blackhawks were mounting the pressure and the comeback.
Did you see the screenshot of Justin Holl's positioning on Dominik Kubalik's goal?
I didn't need to see a screenshot. I saw the full clip unfold where Rubins kind of was holding up to his man, maybe a step behind, but he was still relatively in good position. And Justin Holl has to come over, and it really did not make any sense considering the fact that Rubins had a good opportunity to try and still keep him to the outside. If Justin Holl had stayed in the middle or blocked that pass off to Kubalik, you wouldn't have that 5-3 goal.
You would never see TJ Brody run a 2-on-1 like that.
Yeah, and that's we've talked many times about Justin Holl on this show. Everybody I think has run its course on him right now. I think maybe the fact that maybe he was still playing third line minutes and he makes a mistake like that, and Kristians Rubins had to take the fall for Justin Holl, considering he was the one that made the mistake last game. I do not agree with that.
Neither do I.
At all. Jumping over to our next topic. Speaking of which is Kristians Rubins. He got the call up early this week, and he got a recall previously before in the game. I think it was against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where Travis Dermott's status was in doubt. But the fact that he got called up there was a sign that maybe if something did happen, like if there was an injury concern, like we're seeing right now, Rubins would have been the guy to be the call up. And fortunately he was. And in 3 games right now, he's looking pretty good. Alex, I just want to get your thoughts on his game so far.
You know what? I think the one thing that Kristians Rubins really has going for him is the fact that you rarely ever hear his name when he's out on the ice. And if you're a rookie defenseman in the NHL, that is exactly what you want. I've been pleasantly surprised with Rubins' game. I mean, I know that the Leafs in their camp were high on him from the very beginning because he had a strong training camp and he's been doing well with the Marlies so far. But I didn't think that he would be anything more than a placeholder when he got in. And I guess you could make the argument that technically he still is just a placeholder, because when Dermott comes back, he probably won't be in the lineup. But honestly, like I think he's done a pretty good job in his role. And the one part of his game that sticks out to me that I really like is the fact that he is able to get shots through traffic like nobody else I've seen on this defensive core. And he's not an offensive player. I don't think anyone's expecting him to go out there and put up, a point every other game or anything like that. But I noticed we've seen Leafs defense in recent years. They've always kind of had issues with, taking shots from the point and either having them float by the net or getting blocked in front by the traffic. Every time Kristians Rubins takes a shot, it finds its way to the net, and obviously hasn't gone in yet, but I really like that aspect of his game. I also think that while he doesn't really play with a mean streak, I do think he uses his body effectively, and being 6'5", it's hard to get past a guy like that. But I've really liked the way that he's sort of been able to use his body to box out opposing wingers. Granted, if he developed a mean streak and he started throwing bigger hits, I think he would become a fan favorite in Toronto very, very quickly because he is an absolute tank. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, I believe, or something in that ballpark. So overall, I don't think anyone can really complain about Rubins' games over these past few, or Rubins' game over these past few games. I think he's been a reliable placeholder. I like his defensive game. I think he's got a good shot. And I think honestly, if injuries keep happening, I think he can be a guy that the Leafs look to call up.
Yeah, I think the vibe that I get from him is I think what they expect from Justin Holl, despite him being a left-hand shot. I think he fits that mold perfectly in a shutdown defender, something that they were hoping. I think Justin Holl is trying to do too much of the offensive side of things. Meanwhile, it's just not working out. And you mentioned his ability to get shots through. And looking at Hockey Reference right now, his shots through percentage at even strength, 83.3% in only 3 games. Not someone who's going to find the offense quite a bit or the score sheet a lot, but the fact that he's getting his chances and the opportunities are there is a really great sign for him. And the fact that what's the one lesson that we learned in hockey? Throw it on net. Anything can happen. And the fact that he has a really good point shot is really something to look forward to. And overall, he has 12 hits in 3 games so far. So that physical aspect is becoming noticeable and something that the Maple Leafs lack. And hopefully right now with the physical presence that they have up front, they're matching that with Kristians Rubins on the back end, if he still gets the games in. Speaking of players that are still, or players that needed to step up, I think none other that many have been surprised with in the past week or so has been Ondrej Kase getting the top 6 minutes and Nick Ritchie. And I'm going to come out flat and say I'm eating my words on Nick Ritchie because I'm pretty sure everyone was, because they were disappointed in the fact that he was getting top 6 minutes, no production with Matthews, no production in the bottom 6, but he was getting his opportunities. It was slowly starting to come with the shots and then the assists. And then he finally got his first goal against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Safe to say that the forward depth of the Maple Leafs is looking really great with the way that Kase and Ritchie have been producing lately.
Yeah, honestly, I tweeted out the other day, another guy you can throw into that group is Michael Bunting. I believe at this point, Ritchie has 6 points in his last 9 games. And I believe Kase has 11 points in his last 13 games. And then you've got Michael Bunting, who's got 13 points in his last 11 games. And I've been very impressed with all 3 of those guys. And you know what? Nick Ritchie too. And he found himself as the scapegoat for a while on Leafs Twitter and on social media until they realized that Justin Holl's absolutely the biggest scapegoat this year. But Nick Ritchie, honestly, I think the one thing about him is he hasn't had a good start to the season, but unlike another guy who didn't have a good start with the Leafs, who was Jimmy Vesey last year, Ritchie doesn't exactly have a salary cap that you could just throw on waivers and bury in the minors. Mm-hmm. I think the Leafs need to do everything. And I've said this before, the Leafs needed to do everything they could to get Ritchie going. And I think the first step to doing that was taking him out of the top 6 because they tried him on both lines in the top 6 and he just never found his footing there. But I've personally loved his game anytime he's been in the bottom 6, whether it's on the third line with third line with Kempf and Kase, or on the fourth line, even with Engvall and Spezza and Simmons. I think we're seeing a better version of Nick Ritchie now than we were over say a month ago. And the points are starting to come along. And honestly, if he can finish the season with 10 to 15 goals and anywhere between 25 and 35 points, something along the lines of that, it's not exactly what the Leafs maybe have wanted. I think best case scenario where you're looking at a guy who could score 20 goals and get 40 points or something like that. But with his slow start to the season, I'm not sure that's going to be the case unless he goes on a tear. But either way, as long as Ritchie can be a good presence in the bottom 6, be a physical presence on the second power play unit in front of the net, have a little bit of a mean streak to his game every now and then, I think he's going to be a crucial player for this team come the playoffs. And I'm happy to see that he's finally turning it around. And in terms of Ondrej Kase, I mean, I've been a fan of Kase's for a couple of years now, and I'm so glad that the Leafs were able to get him when his value is the lowest it's ever been, because the fact that he's a restricted free agent heading into this upcoming offseason, I think he's going to be a guy the Leafs are going to do everything they can to keep him. And if they can't keep him, they get some sort of compensation out of it, which is huge. And I think Kase has deserved a chance in the top 6 for a while now, as much as I do like him in the bottom 6 on that third line with Kempf. And I think another thing about Kase is the fact that he is finally getting some time on the power play. Did you notice in that game against Columbus I can't remember if it was Columbus or Tampa Bay, but he was put on the top power play unit, and 10 seconds into the first power play of the game, he scored.
Tampa Bay.
It was Tampa Bay. That's right.
And it was great net front presence too, something that they were trying to have and maybe utilize a player down low below the goal line. And yeah, there was a tip or opportunity to John Tavares. He passed it and then he got the rebound and just lifted it over Ondrej Vasilevskiy. Yeah.
So overall, I mean, I've been clamoring for him to get a shot on the power play all year long because he's got the offensive ability to do it. Mm-hmm. And, another thing I really like about Kase that I've said before, and I'll say it again, I know that hockey fans have a tendency to turn their backs on players who find themselves on the injured list more often than not. And I do agree with that to a sense. There are certain scenarios where it gets annoying when a guy can't stay healthy. But Ondrej Kase, if he ever finds himself on the injured list, I am going to be the last person to give him hell for it, because this guy has an absolute motor when he is on the ice. He is all over the place. He's throwing himself in front of the puck. He's throwing the body. He's the first one into the corners. This guy is not afraid to put his body on the line. And, if he gets injured doing that, he was getting injured doing his best to help the team win. And I think that's one thing about him that makes his game so valuable. And he is another guy who could play a crucial role come the playoffs, because you want a guy who's willing to do whatever it takes to win games. And you obviously don't want to see him get injured in a meaningless, well, I won't say meaningless, but get injured in a random regular season game in November, December, or something like that. But I mean, I've always admired his tenacity and his hustle. And I think if he keeps it up, he's going to be a hell of a player. And I really hope they can keep him around beyond this year.
You mentioned his tenacity too, and even the game against the Chicago Blackhawks, I believe he got hit by Connor Murphy, and he gets right back up. He's angry. He doesn't like it. He takes another run at Connor Murphy, but gets knocked down. And this is a guy who just doesn't care. He will go after anybody and be in their face no matter what. And for two former Bruins who, when I wrote an article about the signings, everyone said that we're not going to get anything out of them. And right now, we're starting to reap the benefits of both Ritchie and Kase. Ritchie's last 10 games, as you mentioned, 6 points in his last 10, dating back to the game against the Islanders. And Ondrej Kase has points in his last 4 games right now, 3 goals, 5 assists. Definitely the goal scoring starting to pick up, and he's on pace right now for 38 points. That'll be the most in his career since his sophomore year with the Anaheim Ducks, where he scored 28 goals or 20 goals and 18 assists. So things are looking great for them. The depth scoring is starting to pick up, and when they need to move them up in the lineup, they're going to be a presence felt. No doubt about that.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that is all for this week's episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment or a question down below. We love to interact and answer whatever is on your mind. And for Alex Hobson, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we'll see you all next week on the Maple Leafs Lounge.